All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Whew, what a first full weekend of the NCAA tournament. That's basically the way to say it, as went from 68 teams to 64 teams, and of course, now down to just 16 teams that remain in the NCAA tournament. Some takeaways from this first weekend. I mean, the bottom line is one of the big things is the dominance of the Big Ten. Okay, the Big Ten sent 9 teams to the dance, and only Ohio State, Wisconsin, and UCLA have been sent home. Everybody else that made this field of 64 is still there. We're already guaranteed of a Big Ten team reaching the Elite Eight. Why? Because Nebraska and Iowa are going to meet in the South Regional semifinal. So, with all of that said, will this be the year that we see the Big Ten win the national championship? Has not happened since 2000 when Michigan State won. Don't get me wrong, we've seen some Big Ten teams get to the Final Four. They just have been unable to get over the hump. Another question for me about the Big Ten: could we possibly see the Big Ten tie the mark that the Big East set back in 1985? The Big East is still the only conference that sent 3 teams to the Final Four in the same year. Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois are all in it. Well, I'll tell you like this: when you have that many teams still in the tournament from your conference, and they're six, they make up 6 of the 16 slots. Eventually some of these teams are going to bump each other off, and again, starting with the South, we've got Iowa taking on Nebraska, and there's a possibility there that we could get an all Big Ten Elite Eight if Illinois were to knock off Houston. We've got Purdue in the West. They got to get through Texas in the Sweet 16. And if they do, they would have to take on the winner of Arizona and Arkansas. You look at the Midwest, Michigan is still the favorite there as far as I'm concerned. They got Alabama in the Sweet 16. And if they get past the Crimson Tide, they would have to deal with either Tennessee or Iowa State in the regional final in Chicago. And then you got the East up in D.C. with Duke, St. John's, Michigan State, and UConn. And for Michigan State to get back to the Final Four right there, they're going to have to earn it. So there's a possibility, yes. But it just comes down to all things coming together for the Big Ten. But sticking with that East Regional, the bottom line is this thing is going to be a bloodbath. And we all knew that coming in, that this bracket was murderer's row. You look at it, just talking about some of the teams who are not or didn't make the regional semis from the East region. You've got Kansas, who got knocked out. TCU got the doors blown off by Duke. Ohio State had themselves a good squad. Louisville is out. Okay, UCLA didn't make it. But nonetheless, let's talk about the 4 teams that are left. We've got Duke as the 1 seed, St. John's, Michigan State, and UConn. And like I said, coming into this tournament, and I will reiterate it right now, I think it was disgusting by the committee to place both St. John's and Connecticut in the same region. Granted, usually we can see teams from the same conference meet up in the same region, but the Big East only had 3 participants this year in the tournament. Typically, when you see multiple teams in a region, it's when a conference has 5 or more participants. The Big East only had 3, but nonetheless, you've got Duke, St. John's, Michigan State, and Connecticut in this region. And I'll say this: Duke has the most talent of all 4 of these teams remaining in this region. But for the Blue Devils as the 1 seed to make it out, they're really going to have to earn it, because I think the difference in this region is going to come down to coaching. John Shire is a good coach who is ascending. However, he's going to have to go through 2 of these coaches to get Duke to the Final Four that have championship experience. Of course, Dan Hurley at Connecticut, he's won a pair of national titles this decade. Tom Izzo is basically the king of the frat house, if you will, as far as coaches go right now in college basketball. Izzo has a national championship with Michigan State. Excuse me, back in 2000, multiple Final Four appearances with the Spartans. And one thing I will always say about Michigan State, as long as Tom Izzo coaches that team, excuse me, they will be a tough out. And then what Duke has to deal with in their Sweet 16 matchup this Friday when they take on St. John's. This game is in Washington, D.C., and it's going to be an advantage for Duke, but it's not going to be an advantage for Duke because I guarantee you, okay, the folks from Queens and Long Island, they are going to be taking the Amtrak down to DC, whether they got to fly to Dulles, whether they can drive, whether they can get on the Greyhound, you name it. There's going to be a lot of people from the New York area coming down to watch the Johnnies. There's a lot of excitement for St. John's right now. Again, like I said yesterday, with their thrilling win over Kansas. If you're the Johnnies, this is why you went out there and got Rick Pitino for moments like this. And of course, everybody is bought into Rick Pitino. You think about a guy, he got Providence to the Final Four back in '87. He got Kentucky there in '93. He got him back there in '96 and '97. He got Louisville to the Final Four 3 times. And now he's got St. John's in the Sweet 16. And for what it's worth, he got Iona to the NCAA tournament as well. So, with all of that said, this right here could be the difference because on paper, Duke is the more talented team than St. John's. I think it's going to come down to coaching. So, I'm not going to sit up there and write the Johnnies off, especially the way that they play that press. But we're going to need to see St. John's knock down some more shots if they want to beat Duke, unlike what we saw against Kansas yesterday in the round of 32. And then that other matchup in the East, Michigan State and Connecticut. Both of these teams have what it takes to go all the way. It's going to be a war of attrition in this one. Dan Hurley asked no quarter and give no quarter, and I guarantee you that Tom Izzo is not going to back down either. So this East region, again, it was murderer's row coming in, and it's still going to be that way. I'm looking at the South. You've got 3 Big Ten teams going up against Houston, but of course, this game right here is in Houston's backyard, and I guarantee you, Cougar Nation is going to show out for this one. Kelvin Sampson, I don't think he gets credit, but I don't think he gets enough credit, and unfortunately, it's going to come from those people who feel like, you know what, he doesn't have that national championship on his resume. Kelvin Sampson is a phenomenal coach. I like the balance on this Houston team, and they're going to be a tough out. It's going to be a very interesting game between Kelvin Sampson's Houston Cougars and, of course, Brad Underwood's Fighting Illini out of Illinois. It's one of those Illinois, they have been tested, but they haven't been tested, if you know what I mean. And I say this because they beat VCU in the second round by 21. They beat Penn in the first round by 35. Things are going to be a lot different come Thursday night when they take on Houston. And then the other part of that, Iowa taking on Nebraska in a Big Ten clash. And you look at the Hawkeyes, they came into this region as a 9 seed. They knocked off Clemson. Of course, the shocker of this tournament so far last night, as we saw Iowa upset the defending national champion in Florida. Now you've got to go against a conference foe, if you will, excuse me, in the Cornhuskers on Thursday. And I'll tell you like this, when it comes to conference opponents facing off in the NCAA tournament, you simply just throw out the rule book. Why? Because of the familiarity with all of these teams. So in the West, is this going to be the year for Arizona? I talked about this during the year. I mean, you look at it, they took care of their business in San Diego in the first 2 rounds. Of course, Utah State, rather, gave them some darn good competition. I expected it to be that way as the Aggies won the Mountain West. And of course, today, the news came out that Jared Calhoun, Utah State's head coach, is going to be taking the Cincinnati job. But now, if you're the Wildcats, you're going to San Jose. And this time, you've got to deal with Arkansas, a very good athletic team for the Razorbacks, and you expect that when John Calipari is the head coach. The speed advantage, I will give to Arkansas. However, the talent depth and the size I will give to Arizona. I think the Wildcats are going to have to use that size as well as their defense if they're going to get past the Razorbacks and get into the Elite Eight. And then on the other half of that, we've got Texas and Purdue. And, Texas has new life in this tournament. We saw the Longhorns struggle coming down the stretch, as we saw them lose 5 out of their last 6, which included being one and done in the SEC tournament, courtesy of Ole Miss. And now for Sean Miller and company, they went to Dayton. They knocked off NC State. We saw them take care of BYU in the first round. Some people want to call it an upset. I will too, with the 11 seeded Texas knocking off the 3rd seed Gonzaga. And now they've got to deal with a very tough Purdue team led by Fletcher Lawyer. So that is going to be a tremendous contest right there. And then finally in the Midwest, we've got Michigan, Alabama, Tennessee, and Iowa State as the survivors. And the Wolverines have just run roughshod over everybody. Easy win over Howard in the first round. They took care of a very good St. Louis team out of the A-10 in the second round, and now they get Alabama. And of course, Alabama has won big. We saw the Crimson Tide start off slow against Hofstra in round number 1 before they took care of their business against the depleted Red Raiders of Texas Tech. And now they've got to deal with Michigan in Chicago. I guarantee you the Maize and Blue are going to be showing up for that contest. And then we've got Tennessee and Iowa State. Will we see the Cyclones get Joshua Jefferson back? That's going to be big for them. So far, so good for Iowa State without him. He was injured early in the win over Tennessee State. We saw Iowa State win going away in the second half yesterday versus Kentucky. And I'll tell you like this, I don't expect Joshua Jefferson to be at 100% if he is eligible or healthy enough to play against Tennessee in the regional semis. But nonetheless, Joshua Jefferson at 70% is going to be needed if Iowa State wants to get past these Tennessee Volunteers. So I'm looking at it right here. Bracket wise, I think with the East, if Duke is going to get out of the East, they're going to have their hands full, because I really feel any one of these 4 teams can win this region. And again, I think it comes down to coaching. Michigan State is not going to be they're not going to be intimidated having to go to DC and having to take on UConn and potentially take on St. John's or Duke there. They're too battle tested. You look at UConn, and it's one of those things for the Huskies. They're in the Sweet 16 and they haven't played well yet. Okay. UConn, in my opinion, hasn't played well for like the last couple of weeks. We saw them get to the Big East final. The Big East was weak this year. And of course, they got blown out courtesy of St. John's. We saw UConn have their hands full with Furman in round number 1 before they were able to separate from UCLA in the second half as well. But for Connecticut to advance, they're going to have to get some better shooting from the likes of Solo Ball. We saw Alex Caravan go 4 of 8 last night from beyond the 3-point line as they knocked off UCLA. But nonetheless, a guy like Solo Ball is definitely going to have to step up if the Huskies want to get back to the Final Four. And then you've got St. John's. And like I said before, with that Rick Pitino press, and this is now his 3rd year there, he's starting to get his guys in the program that he wants. And this Johnny's team, they are relentless and they come after you. So that region right there is a toss-up for me. I think the South, yeah, we've got 3 Big Ten teams there, but I think it's going to be Houston's region to lose. Out west, I want to say Arizona, if they can get past Arkansas. Okay, that's going to be the biggie right there. They've got to find a way to get past that athletic team. And like I said before, they have to use their size advantage if they're going to do it. And honestly, in the Midwest, I think it is Michigan's region to lose. This team, even with the injury to Kaysen, they are still a very dangerous team. And on top of that, Dusty May and the job that he has done in a very quick period of time on the coaching scene. You think about what he did at Florida Atlantic, and you think what is going down for him at the University of Michigan right now. So with all of that said, okay, we've got 16 teams. We've got 5 conferences represented. And when it's all said and done, one of the power conferences that saw a lot of had a lot of representatives in this tournament, they've only got one team standing, and that's Duke. And I'm talking about the ACC. The ACC sent 8 teams to the big dance, and only Duke was able to get through to the Sweet 16. You think about it. I mean, the ACC just started dropping like flies from the word go because NC State and SMU, they didn't even make it out of the first four. Okay, and then of course the shocking loss by North Carolina, if you will, it wasn't a shock to me as they fell to VCU. And the bottom line is, um, the only loss, if you will, that I think was somewhat of a shock was Virginia losing to Tennessee. But honestly, if you saw Virginia in the first round against Wright State, and you know how Rick Barnes is with the Volunteers, it really should not have been that much of a shock. The ACC got 8 teams, but in my opinion, it was still somewhat of a down year for the ACC. I still think this is a premier basketball conference. You think about it. Since 2015 alone, we've seen Duke win a national championship. We've seen North Carolina win one. We've also seen Virginia win one coming out of the ACC. And both Duke and Carolina have multiple appearances of Final Four in the Final Four. And you could also throw Syracuse into that mix as far as getting a Final Four bid in that conference during that time frame. So nonetheless, it's a down year for the ACC, and they've got to get better in these games right now against the other power conferences. Right now, the Big Ten has 6 representatives. We got 4 from the SEC. Of course, the SEC sent 10 schools, and 3 from the Big 12, and then 2 from the Big East. Remember, the Big East only had 3 bids, and they've still got more teams in the Sweet 16 than the ACC does. Like I said, of those 10 teams from the SEC who did not make it, I think the biggest shocker, clearly, as far as who has gone home at this point, has to be Florida. Okay, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Gators, they were a deep team, talented team. They still had the look of a team that could potentially go all the way, but at times something just wasn't there. And I know they had a dominant SEC season. We saw it in the loss to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, and then of course we just saw it yesterday against Iowa. Very bad defense on that last possession by the Gators, and that was a big part of it. But you know what? With Todd Golden, he has this program definitely in the right direction. So again, getting back to just 5 conferences, will that be the way that things are going forward? Yes or no? Because some people are saying, you know what we're seeing right now is the death of the mid majors, because the only 2 double-digit seeds that are still remaining in this tournament are power conference teams. We have the 11 seeded Texas, and of course, we have um, the 9th seed Iowa. Okay, these are the 2 like low seeds, if you will, that are still in it. And of course, in the case of Texas, they are the only double-digit seed that made it through. And of course, in recent years, we've seen the mid majors make a big push, if you will, not just for the first round, but also the second round. We saw a 15 seed St. Peter's a couple of years ago make it all the way to the Elite Eight. I will tell you like this: I'm not going to sit up here and write off the mid majors. I still think they will have their say, and I think that this tournament showed that. You look at High Point in the West region. High Point knocked off Wisconsin. They were right there, okay, with Arkansas. Okay, so it's not like these teams are not close. You think about the East region in round number 1. Siena had a double-digit lead on Duke at the half before the Blue Devils turned on the Jets in the second half. And of course, Siena really didn't use their bench, and you could see that their starters just were run out of gas, or ran out of gas rather. And you got to wonder what could have been if then Siena head coach Jerry McNamara had gone to his bench. Maybe we're talking about things differently. Furman gave Connecticut all that they could handle before they bowed out late. And then Wright State with Virginia. Virginia was a 3 seed in the Midwest, and Wright State was right there with them. So I'm not going to write off the mid majors. I will tell you like this. Like I said the other day, there's not a lot that separates the guys at the D1 level. Yeah, you have your superstars, and you're always going to have your superstars, your elite stars at every single level. But these kids can ball, okay? And I think teams like High Point show that. Not only can these kids ball, they're hungry because they know that if they have a good season coming from a mid major, they might have an opportunity to step up and play at one of these schools in the power conferences for the next year. So guess what? Just like these head coaches are auditioning for a bigger job, so are these players. And getting back to it, speaking of the head coaches, they're going to continue to audition as well from these smaller schools because when you have success at the smaller schools, you move up. This is why I am not here to write off the mid majors. And like I said before, a very good, impressive showing by some of these schools. Yeah, we got some blowouts. Of course, LIU was expected to get blown out by Arizona, and they were. Prairie View A&M was expected to get blown out courtesy of Florida, and it did happen. But again, like I said, High Point had a great showing for themselves. How about Miami of Ohio in the first four when not a lot of people gave them a chance, and they went out there and knocked off SMU? Granted, things were different in the round of 64 when they had to take on Tennessee. And you got to wonder, well, what could have happened? Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But what could have happened if Miami of Ohio didn't have to play that first game? But nonetheless, I am not going to write off the mid majors. I still think they are going to have a say in how things break down in college basketball. Maybe not, we might not see a 14 get on a run like we have in the past, but it still wouldn't surprise me in the first round to see a 15 knockoff a two, a 14 knockoff a three, and so forth. Okay, we had, VCU as an 11 knockoff North Carolina. We had Texas coming out of a power conference, of course, as an 11 knockoff BYU. And of course, the Longhorns are still alive. High Point was a 12. And like I said, High Point was very, very close. I know, quote, Mean Gene Oakland, if you will, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, but nonetheless, they were extremely close to knocking off Arkansas. So again, I still think that the mid majors will be a force. But nonetheless, looking at the remaining teams on this board, we've got the potential for an all Big East Elite Eight in the East. The same for the Big Ten in the South, and the same for the SEC in the Midwest. And here's another big shocker out of the remainder of this tournament. North Carolina, Kansas, and Kentucky are all home. Three of your perennial blue bloods, okay? And in the case of two of them, they could be looking for new head coaches this summer, just for different reasons. But nonetheless, for North Carolina, like I said the other day after they lost, they were not the same team following the Caleb Wilson injury. This is why it did not surprise me. I said it before the tournament that it wouldn't surprise me to see VCU knock off Carolina, and they did. You think about Kentucky, they spent a lot of money on that roster, my friends, and it didn't work out. And then, of course, Kansas. Um, Kansas finished third in the Big 12 this year, but Kansas just was never right to me all season long. Something just was not there. And again, it did not surprise me to see St. John's beat them yesterday. Again, those 4-5 matchups can go either way. All right. In the case of Carolina, some people out there trying to say that they're no longer a blue blood. Listen, the name North Carolina, and once you put that name on the jersey, it still means a lot. In the college basketball world, the same thing can be said for Kentucky, and the same thing can be said for Kansas. And I guarantee you, as these three-story programs are sitting home watching right now, I guarantee you that all three of them are going to retool and look to come back much stronger for 2027. TFX, my man, what's going on, man? Happy Monday to you. You're asking me, how far can St. John's go? Well, I'll tell you like this. It wouldn't surprise me if St. John's knocked off Duke on Friday. Not saying it's guaranteed, but it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me to see St. John's cut down the Nets as the East Regional champs. And it wouldn't surprise me if St. John's was the last team standing. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but it is a very good possibility. I like the way that St. John's plays defense. And if you, and I'm sure you have, okay, if you have followed Rick Pitino's basketball career, whether it was the NBA or whether it was college, okay, all of his teams pressed, and that press works better in college, and it works better when Pitino has a couple of years under his belt out of stop. You think about by the time he had Kentucky ready to win the Final Four or win the national championship, that press was legendary. I think about Louisville's runs with him. That press was legendary. When Providence got to the Final Four, it was all about that press, and we're seeing it right now. Zuby Ejiofor, I think, has benefited not only from Patino, but he's also benefited from staying in school because aside from his play, he's become a leader. Okay, and you see this St. John's team; they're hungry. They're playing with a chip on their shoulders, and they've got something to prove. It would be very interesting if, and this is a big if right now, if we get Connecticut St. John's in the East Regional Final, because it would mean the fourth time that these two teams have met this season. And again, I can't say this enough. Very disgusted that the committee put St. John's and Connecticut in the same region. I thought that was stupid right there. But nonetheless, to your point, I think the Johnnies do have the potential to go all the way, but they're not the only ones in this tournament. I think several of these teams, still have the potential to be the last team standing. I think Houston has a good shot. I like Arizona's chances. I really like Michigan's chances. Is Iowa State going to get Joshua Jefferson back at some point? We got to wait and see right there. Also, I like Michigan State's chances as well, even though Michigan State, for them to do it, they'd have to pull off something that has never happened. And I say that because no team has ever lost the first game of their conference tournament and gone on to win the national championship. That's what the Spartans have to do. And then Connecticut, they're not as good as they were when they went back to back, but still, you've got talent on this team. You've got Alex Caravan, a guy who knows about those championships. Okay, you've got Dan Hurley, and people can say whatever they want about Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley is a darn good coach. He's a passionate coach, and he wants to win. Okay, and if you're a youngster out there who wants to go out there and play basketball at a top level and wants to win, you want to go out there and play for a guy like Dan Hurley or a Tom Izzo or so many others. Okay, but nonetheless, I think there are some good teams still in this tournament that do have the potential to go all the way. I know that there are some people out there who are probably disappointed in their brackets at this point, but guess what? That's the name of the game, folks. And I think that's part of what makes March what it truly is. But like I said, these first two rounds have been extremely exciting. We're down to just 16, and the excitement is only going to ratchet up a little bit more. I think DC is going to be electric on Friday and Sunday with these all of these four teams there. You think about basketball royalty, if you will, Connecticut. Six national championships since '99 to this decade. You think about what Michigan State continues to do. You think about what Duke, what they continue to do. And again, that squad with the Boozers, leading the way right there. Duke is as athletic as they come. And then you've got St. John's. That is going to be fun basketball right there. The Big Ten invading the great state of Texas. Three Big Ten teams in the South Regional final. The size of the Illini. You've got Nebraska with Fred Hoiberg with what they're doing. You look at Iowa, the way that they can stretch the floor and hit the outside shot, the way that they can go inside as well. And then you've got the West Regional. Arizona has been so close several times to getting back to the Final Four since they last were there in 2001. You think about it, they got there twice to the Elite Eight, three times rather, to the Elite Eight with Sean Miller as their head coach. Lute Olson got them back there both in 2005 as well as 2003. They have been unable to get over the hump. And then we're not even talking about Arkansas, okay? John Calipari got Memphis to the Final Four. He got UMass to the Final Four. He got Kentucky to the Final Four multiple times. Okay, he's trying to do it there for the Razorbacks and become the first head coach since Nolan Richardson to lead the Hogs to the Final Four. You've got Texas and Sean Miller. Can this be the year that Sean Miller finally breaks through and gets to that Final Four? And then you've got Purdue with Matt Painter, and then with the Midwest. I still think this bracket is Michigan's to lose. If the Wolverines are not cutting down the nets Sunday in Chicago and going to the Final Four, I'll be surprised. I think they take care of the business against Alabama. And like I said, um, Iowa State's going to need Joshua Jefferson in this game. They were able to skate by in rounds 1 and 2 without him, but against a very good Tennessee team, a very good coached Tennessee team under Rick Barnes, they are definitely going to need him. But like I said, there was plenty of excitement in the first full weekend of this tournament. Of course, the upsets, in my opinion, are part of what makes the NCAA tournament what it is. We still saw some upsets. We still saw some very competitive games from the double-digit seeds. But nonetheless, it's all about the big boys for the most part right now. Will it be Big East, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, or SEC that's going to be the final conference standing? And let's see who cuts down the nets. But nonetheless, we're at the Sweet 16. Before you blink, it'll be the Elite Eight. And a week from now, we'll be talking about just four teams remaining, folks. Who's it going to be? Just got to wait and see and find out. But nonetheless, fine, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. TFX, my man, as always, definitely appreciate you chiming in. Big sports weekend, my man. The start of the MLB season is right around the corner, folks. Right here. It'll be here before you blink. All right. Got the NCAA tournament still in gear. Stretch run time for both the NHL as well as the NBA. Opening day, my man. Yeah, I can't wait. I don't know about you. I know who you're rolling with for the MLB season. Hopefully, they make you a happy guy. I'll leave it at that. All right. But for everybody else, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it'll be my pleasure to do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, and you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. You said been a long, cold winter. Well, listen, and you're saying you need some opening day. Well, I'll tell you like this, man. We are looking at the calendar, and it's almost the end of March. Before you blink, it'll be the 1st of May, and you know what? Those heavy coats will turn into light jackets, and the next thing you know, you're going to be breaking out the barbecue. So you know what? Just keep hope eternal. That's all I can say. And also, if you're on Facebook, definitely be sure to check out the Sports Depot 365. And like I always say, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.